Hey, my friends. Today I have a really special guest. Her name is Sydney. I'm going to give you all her information and I'm at the bottom of the podcast, but I'll also have her explain herself and her journey to you. She is a transformational speaker. And some of the things that just really drew me to her is she talks about becoming unpretty. She talks about helping women shine, which I absolutely love. So, welcome, Sydney, to my podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Yes, I'm so excited. It's so good to be here with all the people listening. I'm excited
Yeah.
to be
Awesome. So this podcast that I have is really a grab my hand together. We can do this journey. I would
in.
love to know about your journey on becoming a speaker because, speaking, people are often very scared of it, but I'm a huge advocate for like, we need to share our stories. So how
Right.
did you happen upon this?
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. It's so funny because in school, we were just talking about school right
Yeah.
before this. I was like so terrified to go speak in front of my classmates whenever I would have to do a presentation. And so it was almost like a huge fear of mine. But once I got into entrepreneurship when I was 21 years old, fresh out of college, got introduced to sales, building a sales team through network marketing. And I realized very early in my journey that the people in the front of the room holding the mic made the money. And I
Mhm.
was like, I want to make the money. And, and I was, young and hungry. And so I figured if I can create enough results in my business, they will put me on stage. And what I saw being on stage as was a representation of success, which is what I was chasing when I was that age, right? Not so much
Yep.
anymore. But it also, what I saw was it allowed people that normally wouldn't have a voice to be able to have a voice and share their message with the world. And
Yeah.
so for me, I was like, I have stuff to say, right? I always have things to say. I have an opinion, and I want to be able to at least have the option to share those and the skill set. And
Yeah.
so, going from entrepreneurship, building I literally built the company so that I could be on stage. And I remember a year later from starting in that company, I was on stage as like a top earner in my age demo. And I was like, I did it. Now I get to speak. And so I really started to host my own events. I was speaking on a weekly basis in front of groups of 2 people, 10 people, 15,000 people. It didn't matter. I was going to get myself up there. And so while it was and still is, I mean, every single time I speak, I'm speaking next week. It's like nerve-wracking and, anxiety ridden in a way. It's been one of the coolest experiences. And what I've actually found is the more I've gotten to be on stage, it's actually where I feel the most myself. I feel like I can be my goofy self. I have my like humor that comes out. And it's really cool to see what we can do when we break past what we think initially is fear, but is usually just excitement. We're just interpreting it in a different way. So it's been a journey, and it's been about 7, 8 years since I started speaking, and I guess 8, yeah. So it's been a journey, and I feel like I'm just getting started with it, which is really cool and really exciting.
Definitely. And going through what you have shared with us through Instagram and other places that I have seen you, it seems like your story has shifted and changed a few times too. So, what you have been talking about right now, like helping women shine, can you tell me more about that? Because I absolutely love that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So it was definitely not the initial start to my career. It first started with wellness, right? I had a health transformation, went on to having a financial transformation, building multiple companies. And after I had, climbed the mountaintop, I was like 26, 27. I'm like, well, what do I do with my life? Because that was, I just did everything that I wanted to do. There's always more, of course, but I got to the point where I realized, oh no, there's always more. When am I ever going to be okay with what I have? And it was when I shut down my second company that I was building, that I found my way to a monk, actually. And I found my way to a mentor. He was a monk, and he also worked at the NASA Space Center and worked on the Hubble project. And so he
Wow.
was like this physicist, engineer, brain meets spirituality. I met him through a really dear friend, a mentor of mine, and he calls it explore. We started to explore every week for 3 hours. And in that process, I started to peel away the masks, the identities that I had picked up along the way, right? Things that I was like, I was going to die on the hill being, right? A powerhouse businesswoman, like
Mhm.
hungry, running for the top. And the more I sat with him and sat in practices and did spiritual practices, the less interesting all of that became, the less interesting dyeing my hair became, the less interesting putting on makeup became. And I started to return what I say to my naturalness, right? My natural inherent self before all the Sid show. And because of that, I mean, it's been a painful process, but it's been literally the most liberating process of my life to be able to just finally, as I'm going into my 30s, like show up as who I authentically truly am without feeling like I have to do anything to like be okay. And so in that, I've learned a lot of things from him. And so I kind of see this process of helping people shine, right? I've been able to have this evolution and this transformation that I'm still continuing to go through every single day. But being able to really pay forward what I've learned from him to the mass public, right? He's never going to be on social media. He's like off grid in Colorado. And so really being able to pay that forward to people. And what I find is when we can deconstruct those identities and take off the masks, it really allows our inherent natural selves to shine through, right? Without all the other things that we, hold on to cover ourselves up over the
Yeah.
years. Mhm.
Yeah, I saw in one of your posts you put learn it, do it, teach it. And as a high school teacher and as a coach, like, yeah, absolutely. That's what we do, right? So I love that you have written that out and that you live by that.
Oh yeah, it's so true. That's kind of how I've just grown quick because
Yeah.
I'm a very quick implementer. I think that's the biggest like piece of advice. If anybody ever needs advice, it's like implement immediately. Whatever you learn, implement immediately and then adjust from there. As the people who never take the action, right? That don't get very far. And so the things that I've done is how can I learn something from someone, literally turn around and teach it on social media to someone somehow, some way. That's the way I learn the fastest. And then we teach to others and pay it forward.
Yeah. And for those listeners out there and myself, I've been like this in the past, but what about like feeling like a failure? Because I know that you have written it and talked about this too. Like, people are like, oh, I don't want to do it because what if I fail? But what you can learn from failure is huge.
Yes. And I think there's no success without failure, right? As corny as that sounds, it's like
Yeah.
the people who are the most successful that I've ever met have literally just failed 10 times more than me.
Yeah.
They just learned because you're gonna learn some lessons the easy way, but more often than not, you're gonna have to learn some the hard way. And so I always looked at it, especially my background in sales. How fast can I fail? How many no's can I get? Because
Mhm.
if I know I have to talk to 10 people to get 2 sales, I want to get 8 no's as fast as possible because I'm getting closer to a yes. Right. And so yes, we can make ourselves more efficient within that process, but if we can just go for no and fail fast, fail forward, fail often as quick as possible, it's ironically the fastest way to having any success. It's
Yeah.
getting over the fear of the it rather than
Yeah.
just doing the it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I try to teach, even like I have two daughters that are younger, and I try to teach, it's okay to fail, but also when you fail, like learn something from that. What can you take away from that? Because every experience we have, good, bad, ugly, sad, is to learn something about in life. And that's what can move you forward. So
Mhm.
I feel like that's really where you're coming from. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's so true. And if we don't learn, we
Hmm.
will continue to make the same failure, right? Because I
Hmm.
believe that the universe or whatever you believe, God, and what I mean, it's all one thing, right? It's we get fed the same thing until we learn.
Yeah.
And so if you have the same relationship, but in 5 different men, it's
Hmm.
because you haven't learned the lesson. So learn the lesson, move on. Right. So it's like once you learn the lesson, you won't get that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I've been down that road and learned that. Yeah.
That's when
I'm
we all
trying
learn
to
the hard
learn
way.
quicker. Definitely. Um, so you have in here, like on some of your posts, becoming unpretty, and that must be coming from the monk. I am looking at you though, and you're stunning. You're absolutely stunning. So can you explain a little bit more? I know you said that it comes from the monk, but can you explain a little bit more how we can take
Yeah.
that into our own personal lives?
Yes, so it's interesting because it was actually the title of Becoming Unpretty came to me through some meditations that I received through Mitch is his name, my
Mhm.
monk Mitch. Um
I like that.
and Mitch, such a non-monk name. But what I started to learn from him because he sits with a lot of women, especially. I'm sure there's a lot of women that listen to this podcast. And he's like, there's the same like multiple disturbances for women, the things that cause us ruckus internally, right? And it's like our looks, our relationship to our body. Like it's a lot about how we look. And so in my identity crisis, you can say, right? Over the last bit of time. A lot of it came down to I realized how wrapped up I was in how I looked. I I was at the point where I was like, I couldn't even leave my house for a while without a spray tan. I felt so unconfident without a spray tan, without my highlights done, without my hair straightened out and blown out. I needed makeup on all the time. I needed my nails done, right? We all have our things that make us feel confident, but are we okay if we don't do them anymore? Or do we actually feel like we're like jeopardizing our safety and security, right? It's like we're taking off our armor. And so I started to literally commit to taking off my armor. I was like, I'm not dyeing my hair. I'm pulling away every possible lifeline I have to keep myself like quote unquote safe, so that I am forced to get comfortable in my natural state and feel confident there. And it was like, I mean, again, spray tan, makeup, hair, taking out the extensions, like all wearing it naturally curly, like I do now, right? Taking off the nails, like all those little things. And it's not just looks, because some people don't have that. Some people don't have that identity that's wrapped in the way that they look as a pretty girl or, you know, an attractive man. But what becoming unpretty represents to all of us is taking away the what does he say? The who's its and whatsies. That's what he calls it. The things that we hold on to, right? That are our identities, whether it's I'm an asshole because I'm an Aries. My Enneagram is NIBBT, blah, blah, blah. We hold on to those things like they are our identity. And then we identify with them. And then we will go and die on that hill, right? It's like, nope, I'm going to be an asshole because I'm an Aries. Like it's, people say that stuff. And I
Right.
used to say that stuff. And so it's, what unbecoming do you need to do to reveal who you truly are? For some of you, it's unbecoming the identity of just being a mom. For some
Yeah.
of you, it's unbecoming the identity of the smart guy, right? What are those identities that we've picked up along the way to keep ourselves safe that are no longer really serving us and actually hindering us, and stunting our growth? And it's interesting because he talks about identity deconstruction with me, and he's like, most people will never do it because it's literally one of the most painful things that you can go through as a human being. It's not easy, but it's worth it if you're willing to like really commit to that process.
Mhm. Definitely. So that kind of brings up something that I wanted to ask you. One, so now that you're kind of on the other side, like, and you're showing that it can be done, like it
Mm-hmm.
helps you, right? Like how do you feel now about doing it? And also, not only did you survive, like your business is still good, your brand is
Mm-hmm.
still good, like everything's still okay. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and the fear for me was, well, what happens when I do take all, is anybody going to like me? Am I going to
Mhm.
be safe? Is my business going to? The first thing is my business has been thriving and I've worked a quarter of the time,
Mhm.
which is that blew every belief I had out of the water. That like blew my mind, right?
Mhm.
And so, I mean, that's the first thing, but there's still moments where I'm going through, I'm writing a book on this. And so each
Mhm.
day I am forced to face, because every day that it gets closer to me launching this book, it gets more and more real that I don't get to go back to that safe identity of the pretty girl anymore, right? I don't get to go back. I'm like, I'm cut. The more and more I share this, the less and less I get to return back to that safe haven. And so each day there's still things that I look on Instagram, I'm like, oh, I wish my hair was blonde. I want to dye my hair.
Mhm.
Okay, let's get off of there. Let's do my practices, right? It's like kumbaya. And so I think it's a daily occurrence, and there's always things that will trigger. But now being on quote unquote the other side of it more than I ever have been, I feel for the first time in my life, like 99% of my day, I'm just at complete peace. There's no stress. There's no chaos. There's no mind chatter. There's some, but I have practices to help with that. But
Mhm.
to me, as a woman who is very type A, plan, blah, blah, da, 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 constant, 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 constant. It's like I would pay $1 million for that. I'd
Mhm.
pay $5 million for that, right? And so I have peace in my heart and I'm very grounded in who I am with none of the masks. And to me, that was like only but a dream, you
Yeah.
know? So that's my hope for people, is that they can actually just return to who they are and feel comfortable there and feel like it's beautiful, and that it's like who they're supposed to be.
Mhm.
because that's freedom, that's liberation, and it's not giving in to all of the wanter behavior on social media and, striving for things we don't even care about, quite frankly.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I know that when I talk to people, you hear out there like, you should love yourself and be in love with yourself. And that's so nice. And I love that. However, it's also really hard. So I really like to start with people like liking yourself, appreciating yourself, and then getting those tools that you're talking about to have when your head does talk a different way, or when you go on Instagram, you're like, oh my God, like you have the tools to back you up. So that's amazing.
Yeah. And it's important because a lot of people, they know the things to do.
Mhm.
Maybe they don't, but oftentimes we know what to do. We just aren't doing it, right? We get stuck in the scroll hole and then we're like deep in brain rot.
Yeah,
It's hard to get ourselves out of that. So it is a practice, and every single day, it's every single moment, it's a practice.
yeah,
And that's why it's difficult, because it's like the little moments, right? It's easy to
yeah,
do something
yeah.
once. It's hard to do it 1,000 times.
Yes, yeah. To make it a practice and a habit into your life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about this book that you're writing? That's very exciting.
Yes. Yeah. So it's called Becoming Unpretty.
Okay.
And it's really, I wrote about half of it, and then 2 weeks ago I was like, this is not it. So I started over. I'm back to it's almost complete now at this point, but I started
That's
over.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's because it's actually flowing. It's
Mhm.
correct. So it's I didn't want to be teaching at people and preaching at people,
Yeah.
and I felt that that was like the essence of the book before, where I was trying to remove myself from it. And so the book is really sharing my process, what I did, how I did it, what practices I did, what I talked to with my mentor, really allowing people to like see into what, if I want to feel peace and liberation and freedom in my life, what do I need to actually go through to get there really? And
Mhm.
so it's a lot of my journey. And then it's also sharing the practices, the conversations with my mentor, things like that. And I mean, not so much a formula, but basically a formula for people to be able to do it in their own lives, to really deconstruct those identities, get rid of the life preservers,
Yeah.
and and hopefully get support in the process.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. It goes back to sharing our story, right? Like speaking out, sharing our story so we know not only are we not alone, but how can we help each other and be there for each other. So I love that.
Yes. Yeah, it'll be great.
One question that I ask everybody that comes on the podcast, because it is called Nurture Herself, and I am all about taking care of yourself, just so that you can show up for other people. You can show up for your book writing or for your audiences, but you can't do that until you take care of yourself. What are one or two things that you do to nurture yourself that you would recommend or
Oof.
that are true to your heart?
So many things, but what are the biggest? When I used to have a bathtub, I would take a bath every single day. Like, I didn't care if it was noon or 8 p.m. or midnight. Like, I would take a bath every single day. And
Nice.
there's something about, for me, being, in the past, like in my masculine throughout the day, right, building the business, being able to like drop into the feminine and just be in a bath. That was,
Water.
yeah,
Water's good.
makes all the difference. And then another very non-conventional that you probably haven't had on the podcast. It's let's see, how do I make this not sound weird? So my teacher, a lot of the lineage that he studied is the Sanskrit lineage, which is actually like, a Hindu language. Many people don't speak it. It's not very common anymore. But there's a text called the Prachavinyahridayam, and it's 20 sutras, and you repeat each sutra 11 times. And I learned it over, the course of last year. And so what I do every single day, it's either one sutra or I'll go on a walk and I listen to a few, but I listen to those sutras and I chant along. And it's
Mhm.
kind of like repeating a mantra to yourself. But in this text, it's talking about the creation of the universe and the descent into the mind, and then coming back together as oneness. And you're chanting these ancient Sanskrit wisdom teachings, and it just infuses me with so much joy. And I truly believe that doing that consistently, just listening to those and like soaking in those, has been what's helped me through a majority of my process. And so I can share that with your audience if they ever want to listen. My boyfriend, he listened one time when we were doing a puzzle and he's like, this is weird, turn it off. And now he's like, can you play the chants in the morning? Can you turn them on for me? He loves listening to them. So they're, it's done by my mentor as well. So it really is infused with like, the monk energy.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's definitely different than I've heard in the past, but I love that because even the chanting is regulating your nervous system.
Mhm.
So, yeah, all the way you're using your throat chakra, all that good stuff that I'm into. So, I love that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like taking a bath for your cells. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Mhm.
Well, Sydney, I'm so thankful that you came on here and shared your journey and where you're headed. I can't wait to read your book and get that into everybody's hands as well. And I just appreciate you coming on here so much.
Me too. Thank you so much. It was so much
Yeah.
fun. And yeah, if you guys have any questions or need any support, I'll send you links to practices, all the things, whatever you need, come ask and I can share.
Awesome. Great. And for you guys out there listening, all you girls out there listening, just remember I always say choose you. You are so worth it. And I love you. And I can't wait to talk to you next week.